The first tool in the lineup is called the Explore Data tool. This tool will allow you to actually examine each of your files, as long as they're tab separated or comma separated files, and take a look at all the different variables and find out really what's in there. Going in my demo folder, we can pick out my favorite file, this Genomes to Fields file, because it has rich information on different corn experiments across 20 different locations of where they were breeding corn and investigating the various values for the traits of those corn grown in different locations. So when I select on that particular comma-separated value file, I get both a preview, but also, if you look below, since my Explore Data tab is selected, I will actually have a choice of many, many different plots that I could examine the data in that file. I could look at group box plots, line plots, scatter plots, you name it. I'm going to look here, for this purpose of this demo, at the pair plots, because that happens to be my personal favorite. What this allows you to do, when I select on it, is first I can choose any number of variables that I might look at. So for this example, I'll just go to the silk days after planting, pollen days after planting. Maybe I'll look at plant height and ear height. And there's a reason I'm selecting those variables, because I think that there's some correlations that I'm expecting to see in those variables. You might have no idea about what variables you're looking at. Maybe you're just completely doing exploratory analysis. In this particular case, I'm looking for possible outliers and information that might suggest that certain data points might not be what they should be. So here, just to give you an idea and orient you about what you're looking at, on the vertical axis, I have my 4 different variables in order: ear height, plant height, pollen days after pollination, and silk. And on the horizontal axis, I also have the same variables in the same order. Now, anytime that I have something along the diagonal axis, on that diagonal, I'm going to actually see a distribution of that particular variable. So here is a distribution of the silk days after planting, and it's kind of unimodal with a little bit of a hump here at the top. Likewise, pollen days after planting is also a pretty tight distribution, and so on. You've got the different variables up there and see those distributions. But here we actually have cross-variable comparisons. So this particular very tight distribution here looks fairly linear, is silk DAP versus pollen DAP, just as we expected. But notice the outlier down here. There's something very odd about that particular point. Likewise, we expected the plant height and the ear height to be fairly linear. And it is. It's fairly tight, but there's a lot of little scraggler data points out there. And curiously, because plant height is supposed to be defined as from the ground all the way up to the top of the first flag leaf, and ear height is up to the top of the highest ear, you don't actually expect the ear height to be ever higher than the plant height. And yet we have a bunch of data here that the ear height, which is going on in this dimension, is longer than the plant height. So that's a little odd that some of these data points should probably be investigated. So you can check all sorts of other things. You could go change variables by clicking on here, and maybe you wanted to examine, some of the same things, but this time you wanted to include test weight and grain yield and so on, and then just go for a rerun. You can just keep doing this ad infinitum. Your imagination is only what's going to limit you here in terms of how you're going to explore the various different data points. And you can see different distributions somehow look a little bit odd, but you might find some trends that you weren't expecting. Or likewise, maybe you don't want to be restricted to just pair plots. Maybe you actually want to check out some of these other plots, and I invite you to do that. And if you want information on each of those plots, then I encourage you to explore all of these data sets by looking on our help page.